Welcome to the table for the Friday, November 22, 2024 installment, Market Plus. Sue Martin is with us again. Sue, we're going to talk beans, hogs, cattle. Got to answer some questions, but I want to start weather. Dan in Nebraska is going to lead us off here. What are the growing years like after a perfect growing season? Now, you first have to, you've already disagreed with me, Sue, that this is was not a perfect growing season. But what can we expect weather-wise here next?
I think the weather going forward is, I think your winter's going to be colder. Now, granted, the one weather service I was telling you about, I haven't seen his full entity, but I think the winter's going to be a colder winter than we had this past year. Of course, that wouldn't take much. And I also think we're going to have more snow. And then as we get towards summer, I think it's going to be interesting, because Dr. Elwyn Taylor would be quick to remind you of the 89-year cycle, and this would be the year that should relate to 1936. So, and that year, the winter before, you had a horrible winter. And so, I don't know.
So if we're buried in snow come February 15th, look out.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying.
I'm hoping my guy comes and cleans us out.
Yeah, exactly, because you're not going out. Let's go Joe in Iowa next, Sue. What's the window of time to be considering locking in of 25 pricing?
I think the window for beans, I think could come before corn, and that's not uncommon. I think it'll be, I'm going to watch January, but I think it's going to be more into March. And then, you know, we look at the Brazilian crop, and they're going to start to steal our thunder, especially if we have a high-priced dollar. Interest rates don't appear like they're going to drop a whole lot more. That makes letter of credits more expensive. So I think we're going to find that we'll have to compete at that time with Brazil starting to harvest the beans and what have you. And that probably will be more March, April. Sometimes beans can push in a year of 5 into May, but I think corn, I'm going to look more towards the April, May, June timeframe. But I think both of them are not good as we go towards the latter part of the year. And I also think if we have to have something that tries to hold us together to make us take us higher, it's got to be, for us, it's got to be a weather market, a really good, stiff weather market.
Even though come January we might get confirmation of that crop was smaller.
Yes, I'm of the opinion that the yield in corn is not as high as they thought. Still a record, but I don't think it's the 183 something that they want to say it is. I don't think it's 182.8. And of course, we were well over last year's 177.1. I still think the corn yield's coming down in the final. The soybeans started coming down pretty good in this November report, and it could come down again. I don't think it'll be majorly, though. They took a pretty big step back on this last report. So I think as we go towards the January report, we'll probably see a little smaller in beans as well. So then it goes over to the demand side. And of course, you know, we know that we've got South America that we're dealing with. Our exports are ahead of a year ago now, and in both beans and corn. Mexico has been very avid in corn and even been coming in for some beans. You know, it used to always be, it was Japan, now it's Mexico. So I think, and everybody's worried, they say, well, this is all happening because of President Trump-elect coming into office, and he, yes, did tariffs in his last tenure, and thinking he'll do it again. I tend to be an optimist. You'd never guess that on the show, would you? $30 beans, yeah. So
somebody wanted $25 corn answer today, but that's another discussion another time.
And but I do think, I don't think President Trump's going to utilize tariffs. I don't think he's going to have to. With Mexico, I don't think he'll have to. And I think with China, I have a feeling they know what's going to happen. Now, granted, if he does, they're going to say, okay, fine, we'll just cancel all these beans. Fine. But China's been known to do that anyway, so.
Right. Late Friday, Kelly Loeffler, former senator from Georgia, was announced to be the president-elect's pick for Secretary of Agriculture. What do you know about her? What could she bring to agriculture? We have somebody, head of USDA from Georgia again.
Well, we do. I guess I don't see much change. I think that it'll be interesting to watch. I thought Sonny Perdue did a good job. I guess I don't know Kelly real well of her, so it'll be interesting to watch. But I think that there's so many changing irons in the fire for when President Trump takes office that I think there's probably some things that we're not even thinking of. I have seen some comments where he may elect to take us off of federal income tax and put us on consumer tax. And that, in effect, would bring companies away from China and other countries and bring them back to the U.S. But also, then we aren't paying that, increased price for consumers because of tariffs.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of unknowns, and we have to
Yes.
let some things unfold. It's curious about your tariff conversation, but I guess Tim's question is maybe not looking at things as rosy. How long is this price downturn going to last? 2 years or 10?
I don't think it's 10. I think that what we're looking at is this next year, I think it's going to be tough on farmers, and so they need to do their pricing. I think they'll tend to do their pricing much quicker than they did this last year, because you always remember the most recent, and they held on way too late, and it didn't pay off very well. So this next year, I think they're going to be more aggressive in making their sales, and that might be a good thing. I think that then as we go from 25 into 26, I think we start to turn our tide and maybe start looking at things getting better as we move towards 28.
Which goes back to we have to let some things play out and kind of see how they unfold. So yeah,
Exactly.
there is a lot. But again, it's back to that we got to have perfect growing conditions, or at least optimal. Doesn't have to be
Yes.
perfect, but we have to be
Right.
better. But let's get back into livestock. We have 2 livestock questions. Let's go beef first. Brock in Montana. Brock is new to submitting a question, so thank you, Brock. We are thinking about retaining all of our heifer calves till spring, or even breeding most of them this spring, and then run through the summer.
I'd go
What are
for
your
it.
thoughts? Go
I'd
for it.
go for it.
Why?
Because I think the prices are going to be awesome. So, and the thing is, the holdback of heifers, he's going to, he's kind of thinking about that, or holding back for breeding. The price of feeder calves should be very, very good, April, May,
Which is always the temptation
to
Take-
feed them on out.
to feed them on out or move on.
And you have to be one thing careful, because we have less numbers of cattle and we're feeding them heavier, but we'll have less numbers again as we see this holdback. And that's going to tighten the supply very tight. So the prices continue to push. Now, the thing is, years of a 5, a lot of times in cattle, which tends to be a year that we see holdback and retaining of heifers and for breeding and what have you, also leads you into the whiplash effect, where prices ultimately then peak and then drop. And so I guess I'd sell them as feeders, especially if we see some moisture. Oh my goodness, yeah.
You wanted to discuss hog market a little bit more.
Yeah.
We talked about this political deal with China going to Brazil saying we need more red meat, but they're also talking about hogs. What are you wanting to talk about hogs?
Well, I just wanted to say, when I look at December hogs, first off, again, seeing a large 4 with a small C on Elliott Wave, just underneath this week's low. Market rallied. It's trying to lift. We closed near our high on Friday. I wanted to just add in there that, the hog index is, I think, around 8708 or something like that. And if the market rallies and tries to align with the hog index, preferably moving up and not the index coming down, I would think 87.75 on December hogs is pretty good resistance. 90 is pretty tough. 90 to 91 is pretty tough resistance on February. So just an FYI there.
And also, not necessarily completely tied together, but sometimes it is. Bean meal, you think, is a possibility of a rallying point. Is that good or bad for hogs and good or bad for beans?
Well, it's very cheap right now, and it'll help. You know, the spotlight's been on soy oil. And of course, soy oil hit the skids late this week, mainly because Malaysian palm oil fell apart, but it had been way high. I think soy meal is going to start to gain favor, and that is going to eventually get the beans caught here and turn them around and rally with the meal. I think end users should be booking meal, and I'd probably book it through March at least.
This was the question I was supposed to get in during the show, and I ran through it there, and I'm almost running through it now, so I need to get it in. By the way, thank you for the questions. Some of them we asked in analysis, so we didn't ask them specifically. Phil, that's what we did there. Thank you for letting me borrow your question. Sylvan in Quebec, Sue. Since the beginning of this marketing year, commodities seem to trade lower even with some export sales numbers being announced. Have markets already expected these sales, or are they just not large enough to react positively? What would make this trend change?
Well, demand markets are always harder to detect or to quantify. I think the market has ignored some of the sales because it's caught up in the carryouts that we had, which now are dropping or have downsized. And you look around the world and we're seeing tightening supplies globally, and even in wheat. And I think then you get the situation going overseas, the potential, now you're worrying about nukes possibly in the Black Sea region. And I think all of that gels this market to where all of a sudden, you know, the focus on the sales is kind of like more political and what have you landscape rather than the actual demand. Because our export sales on beans are running ahead now, corn sales running very well, and wheat has a little work to do, but it'll come along too. So I think when I look at the fact that the market looks like it's ignored some of these sales, I think it's just I think it wants President Trump to get in and see just what does he do with tariffs, and if he doesn't, because they're all anticipating they're the more negative attitude. Well, China will just cancel all these sales they've been buying and go to Brazil. They might do that anyway.
They've already proven that they're not afraid to go ring up Brazil.
Exactly.
I appreciate your time. It is so good to see you. Have a great Thanksgiving.
Thank you, and you too, and all your listeners.
I appreciate it. Sue Martin, everyone. A reminder to get signed up for our new free newsletter at markettomarket.org. It's right there on our page. Next week, we are going to check economic conditions on Main Street and in the fields of America. Ernie Goss and Chris Robinson. We talked to them in July. We're going to talk to them here at Thanksgiving. Thanks for joining us. Have a great week.